Hello and welcome to the Solid Signal podcast for the week of August 18th, 2014. I am your host, Stuart, aka SS at Solid Signal. I say aka because I've got some changes coming to the Solid Signal blog and I don't want to tip my hat too much, but well, you'll just have to watch to see what comes up. You know, I was really very happy to get all the feedback that I got last week about the podcast that I did, since I'd never really gone that far afield, and I'm glad to hear that you all are listening, and I'm glad to hear that you will occasionally indulge me. That said, I'm going to give you another sort of off-topic podcast this week, and I promise after that we'll be back to the regular pattern of antennas, cellular service, satellite TV, that sort of stuff. So bear with me one more week, or if you really liked what you heard last week, here's another one for you. You know, I am a member of the social media. I am a blogger and a podcaster, and I'm putting my opinions out there for potentially millions of people to see. And so it strikes me that it's sort of incumbent upon me as a social media professional to talk a little bit about the importance of social media when things really get bad. It's not just in other countries either. As we learned this week, social media really plays a part in getting information out when things go bad here in our own country. I don't want to get political. I don't want to take sides. For me, there's a pretty clear right and wrong here, but that's not what this is about. This is about getting the information out. And there has been a very interesting shift in recent years, and I'd say it started probably about 20 years ago, when news went from being largely reporting what happened yesterday to largely reporting what's happening right now. It was live satellite feeds from all around the world that first brought us live pictures and video of bombings taking place in the Gulf War of 1991 and 1992. Since then, we have become accustomed to the idea that we're going to get our news now. And increasingly, that has fallen to what we would call citizen journalists. That was the old school term for what are now bloggers, tweeters, and Facebook posters. Just average folks who happen to be where the problem is and who are interested in putting that information out to the rest of the world. These days, we often get our first view of anything going on from Facebook and Twitter, and from Vine to some extent, and other live video sources. But the point here is that these sources are reporting what they see, and they're not adding any perspective. And that's actually kind of a good thing, because when you've got all these people out there just publishing kind of what they're seeing, then you get a lot of views on the same subject. You're not relying on a single view as you used to a long time ago. You could say that sort of the milestone, the one that mattered in citizen journalism, was way back in 1963 when an otherwise unknown person named Abraham Zapruder shot 8mm film of President Kennedy's assassination. And that film has become the best document that we have of that terrible event. Now, of course, that same event would have been recorded by hundreds and thousands of video recorders, Twitter feeds, Hangouts, just you name it. And it would be a lot easier to figure out exactly what happened by triangulating from all of those available angles. But back then, we just had one. The Zapruder film, as we call it, tells it as it is, but it gives us absolutely no perspective as to why things are happening. And citizen journalists today, call them bloggers, tweeters, Facebookers, what have you, are doing exactly the same thing. They're showing us what's happening without giving us any perspective. Of course, sometimes these social media folks do try to give their own perspective, but without being trained journalists, sometimes that perspective is right and sometimes it's wrong. And oftentimes the wrong information just gets repeated and repeated and repeated until it almost seems like the truth. And that's the scary part of citizen journalism. Folks who are posting on social media need to be extremely careful that what they post is as close as possible to an honest representation of what's going on. If you want to add your opinions, of course, everyone's entitled to them. But one of the reasons that we have highly paid journalists and newspaper people and television people is to hopefully add real perspective, add the editorial touch if you will, to what's going on, to try to help us put together a real picture of not just what's happening, but why it's happening. The stuff that's happening this week and last week down in the South is really something that is going to take some time to understand. It's hard to know for sure at this point exactly where this all bubbled up from. Obviously, that it was an event that set it off, and I think we all know that. But why did that event cause such an explosive set of repercussions? I'm not qualified to do that. I'm just a blogger. I'm in the social media. Maybe someday I'll be a fancy, well-paid journalist, and I rather doubt it because I do enjoy social media so much, and it's where it makes sense for me to be. But I acknowledge and I encourage all of you out there who are obsessively tweeting and vining and Facebooking and Instagramming to think before you render an opinion. Be vigilant in documenting what you see, but know that your perspective, your point of view, while it's valuable, is only one point of view, and a real understanding of history takes multiple points of view. Well, I have to admit that actually sounded pretty good. What do you guys think? I'm going to sign off for the day because I think that I ended on a high note. I'd like to thank you again for participating with me in some off-topic podcasting, and I hope you'll visit us and join us again next week and in further weeks to get back on the topics that Solid Signal and the folks who pay the bills like to hear about. Until then, have a great week.